The coffee had gone cold in his hand, but Marcus barely noticed. He'd been sitting in this same hospital waiting room for 43 hours, watching strangers come and go, their faces etched with worry, hope, or grief. He didn't know any of them. He didn't know her either, not really. Just a woman who'd smiled at him once in a grocery store checkout line, who'd dropped her wallet on a rainy Tuesday, whose name he'd learned only when the paramedics asked him to identify her, Sarah Mitchell. Marcus Chen had never considered himself a hero. At 34, he was just another software engineer grinding through life in Seattle, the kind of guy who avoided eye contact on the subway and pretended not to see homeless people asking for change. His therapist said he had compassion fatigue, a fancy term for being too tired to care. His ex-wife had simpler words for it: "You're checked out, Marcus. From everything. From everyone." Maybe she was right. But something had shifted the Tuesday afternoon when he'd witnessed the accident. He'd been walking to his car, head down, scrolling through work emails, when he heard the screech of tires and the sickening crunch of metal. The SUV had blown through a red light, T-boning a silver sedan at the intersection. Most people had stood frozen or pulled out their phones to record. Marcus had run toward the wreckage. The woman in the sedan was unconscious, bleeding from a gash on her forehead. Marcus had held pressure on the wound until the ambulance arrived, his white shirt turning crimson. The paramedics had called him brave. He'd felt anything but. He'd just moved, his body acting before his mind could talk him out of it. Now, nearly 2 days later, he was still here. He'd called in sick to work. He'd ignored texts from friends asking where he was. He'd told himself a dozen times to leave, that he'd done his part, that Sarah Mitchell was nothing to him. A stranger. Someone whose life had briefly intersected with his through circumstance and chaos. But he couldn't leave. The doctors said she was stable but critical. No family had shown up yet. The social worker mentioned something about estranged relatives, a sister in California who hadn't been reached. Sarah was alone, unconscious in ICU, and for reasons Marcus couldn't articulate, that bothered him more than the blood on his hands had. He stood up, finally ready to go. His back ached from the plastic chairs. His stomach growled. He'd eaten nothing but vending machine crackers. This was ridiculous. He didn't owe this woman anything. He'd probably never even spoken to her. One smile in a grocery store didn't create an obligation. He was halfway to the elevator when he heard the voice. "Please wait." Marcus turned. A little girl was running down the corridor, her sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. She couldn't have been more than 7, with dark braids bouncing behind her and a backpack shaped like a ladybug. An older woman, maybe 60, with kind eyes and tired shoulders, hurried after her. "Please wait for my mom," the girl called out, skidding to a stop in front of Marcus. She was breathless, her brown eyes wide and pleading. "They said you saved her. They said you stayed. Please don't leave yet." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. I don't. "I'm Clara," the older woman said, catching up. She placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "This is Emma. I'm Sarah's neighbor. I've been watching Emma since." She trailed off, glancing at the child. "Since the accident. We just heard. Emma insisted we come immediately." "Is my mom going to die?" Emma asked, looking up at Marcus with a directness that made his throat tight. He crouched down to her level, something he'd seen other adults do but had never done himself. "The doctors are taking really good care of her," he said carefully. "She's strong. But you stayed," Emma said. "Clara told me. She said a stranger stayed with my mom because she was alone." "That's you, right?" Marcus nodded, unsure what to say. "Then you're not really a stranger," Emma decided with the simple logic of childhood. "You're the man who held my mom's hand when I couldn't." He hadn't realized tears were rolling down his face until Clara offered him a tissue. The dam had broken, and suddenly Marcus was crying in front of a little girl and a grandmother he'd never met, crying for Sarah Mitchell and for every person he'd walked past, every time he'd chosen convenient numbness over difficult connection. "I'm sorry," he managed. "I don't usually." "Don't apologize for caring," Clara said softly. "The world needs more of it." Over the next week, Marcus learned Sarah's story in fragments. She was a single mother, a nurse who worked double shifts at a community clinic serving uninsured patients. Emma's father had left when she was a baby. Sarah's parents had passed away. She had the sister in California, but they hadn't spoken in 5 years over some family argument nobody could quite remember the details of anymore. Sarah was beloved at the clinic, feared by no one, needed by everyone. She brought donuts on Mondays and remembered patients' grandchildren's names. She worked holidays so colleagues with larger families could be home. She'd been driving home from a 16-hour shift when the SUV hit her. Emma stayed with Clara but visited the hospital every day after school. Marcus found himself showing up too, though he couldn't explain why. He sat with Emma in the cafeteria, helping with homework. He brought Clara coffee and listened to stories about Sarah's kindness. He read aloud to Sarah's unconscious form from books Emma selected, Harry Potter, then Matilda, then Where the Red Fern Grows, which made them both cry. "Why are you doing this?" Emma asked him one evening, coloring at Sarah's bedside while machines beat their steady rhythm. "Most people don't stay for strangers." Marcus thought about it. "Maybe we're not supposed to be strangers," he finally said. "Maybe that's the mistake, thinking that the people around us are separate from us just because we don't know their names yet." Emma nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense. "My mom says we're all connected. Like a big invisible web. When you help someone, the web gets stronger." On the 9th day, Sarah woke up. Marcus wasn't there when it happened. He'd finally gone home to shower and change clothes, but Emma called him, screaming with joy, and he dropped everything and drove back to the hospital faster than was probably safe or legal. Sarah was groggy, confused, in pain. But she was alive and conscious and looking at her daughter with tears streaming down her face. "Baby," she whispered, and Emma crawled carefully into the bed beside her, gentle around the tubes and wires. Marcus hung back by the door, suddenly feeling like an intruder on this sacred moment. He should leave now. His job here was done. She was awake. She had her daughter. They'd be okay. He turned to go. "Wait," Sarah's voice, weak but clear. "Please." He stopped, looked back. "They told me what you did," she said. "At the accident. And after. Staying. Helping Emma. Being here." Her voice broke. "You didn't have to do any of that." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "But I wanted to." And he realized it was true. Somewhere between the blood and the waiting, the coffee runs and the homework help, the vigil in an uncomfortable chair for a woman he'd never met, Marcus had stopped feeling checked out. He felt present, connected, alive in a way he hadn't in years. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. "For waiting." "Thank you," Marcus replied, "for teaching me how to stay." 3 months later, Marcus stood in the community clinic where Sarah worked, now as a volunteer. He'd quit his software job, to everyone's shock, and was training to become an EMT. Emma had drawn him a picture that hung on his refrigerator. A stick figure holding hands with 2 other stick figures, all 3 connected by a red thread. The invisible web, he thought. Made visible through simple acts of not walking away. He'd learned Sarah's lesson well. We're all strangers until someone decides to stay.